They shot the human cadet. 23 seconds later, she walked out, covered in his blood. Holding his head isn't just a title. It's the moment everything changed. After being poisoned, crushed by gravity, and riddled with metal projectiles, Cadet Mira Jensen's death activated hidden nanites within her body. She emerged transformed, holding Tactical Officer Vorden's severed command core, forever shattering the Consortium's assumptions about human capability. The corridors of Nexus Prime's Interstellar Defense Academy gleamed under the harsh artificial lighting. Every surface polished to perfection as befitting the Consortium capital's premier military institution. For 12 millennia, the Academy had trained the finest officers from across 17 sentient species, each with their own evolutionary advantages, each with their proper place in the galactic hierarchy. And then there were the humans. Cadet Mira Jensen walked with measured steps down the eastern corridor of Training Block C, her back straight despite the crushing pressure of Nexus Prime's 1.4 standard gravity. At first glance, she appeared unremarkable, average height for her species at 170 centimeters, regulation-cropped dark hair, and the standard blue-gray cadet uniform that did little to flatter any bipedal form. Her file indicated adequate but unexceptional performance in theoretical courses, marginal combat proficiencies, and the expected respiratory limitations of her species. Nothing in her visible demeanor suggested she would become the catalyst for the greatest upheaval in Consortium hierarchy since the Melberry Schism 2,000 years prior. "Jensen," came a voice from behind her. The consonants stretched in the distinctive accent of the Pelosi, a species whose evolutionary path had gifted them with extraordinary cognitive processing, but little in the way of physical resilience. Mira turned to see Cadet Kira, her study partner from xenopolitical theory. The Pelosi's translucent skin pulsed with delicate blue circulatory patterns, a sign of mild anxiety. "They've moved the simulation briefing forward," Kira said, her 4 eyes blinking in rapid succession. Tactical Officer Vorden requested specifically that all human cadets report early for additional safety parameters. Mira suppressed a grimace. Drax Vorden, veteran of the Rimward campaigns and decorated tactical genius, made no secret of his disdain for humans and their premature inclusion in Consortium affairs. In his 3 decades as training officer, he had failed every human cadet assigned to his division. "Thanks for letting me know," Mira replied, adjusting her course towards Simulation Chamber 17. "Any idea what scenario they're running?" Kira's skin flickered to a deeper indigo. "Class 7 gravity variations with atmospheric toxin response protocols. He's pushing for failure parameters well beyond human physiological tolerances." Of course he was. Vorden had spent the past 6 months systematically exposing every perceived human weakness, from endurance limitations to decision-making under extreme duress. "Standard procedure," Mira said with a thin smile. "I'd better not keep him waiting." As Kira drifted away toward her own training assignment, Mira touched the small scar behind her left ear, a barely perceptible ridge where Consortium medical scanners detected nothing but ordinary scar tissue. Beneath it lay her one advantage, her one secret, a legacy from parents who'd understood all too well the cost of being human in a universe controlled by elder species. The doors to Chamber 17 parted, with a pneumatic hiss. Inside, the circular room housed 12 simulation pods, arranged like the petals of some mechanical flower. At the center stood Tactical Officer Vorden, his massive Arcturan frame towering over the 3 human cadets already assembled. The officer's chitinous exoskeleton gleamed with the dull metallic sheen of his species, his compound eyes fixed on a holographic display hovering before him. "Cadet Jensen," he said without looking up, the translator module at his throat, rendering his clicks and vibrations into standardized Consortium speech. "You've been assigned to Pod 23. Mira frowned. "Sir, there are only 12 pods in this chamber." Pod 23 is being brought online specifically for today's exercise, Vorden replied, manipulating the holographic interface with practiced efficiency. The Academy director wishes to gather additional data on human performance metrics. A lie. Mira had seen enough of Vordan's prejudice to recognize the fabrication, but challenging a superior officer would only provide him additional grounds for dismissal. Instead, she moved toward the far wall where technicians were finalizing calibrations on a 13th pod that had been wheeled in for the occasion. Its surface appeared identical to the others, but Mira noticed subtle differences in the control panel configuration. Lieutenant Sora, a Melbari instructor whose ribbon-like appendages constantly waved in the air currents, approached with a data pad. Cadet Jensen, you'll need to sign acknowledgement of the enhanced parameters. Her voice held a note of concern that her species couldn't fully conceal. Mira scanned the document. Standard liability waivers, elevated gravity tolerances, atmospheric contaminant exposure levels, all pushed to the upper boundaries of what consortium medical profiles listed as survivable for humans, but technically within protocol. Everything appears in order, Lieutenant, Mira said, pressing her thumb to the biometric signature field. The exercise begins in 15 minutes, Sora added quietly. Remember your emergency protocols. As the Melbari drifted away, Mira caught Vordan watching her, his mandibles clicking in what she'd learned to recognize as satisfaction. On the overhead observation deck, several figures had gathered, not the usual Academy instructors, but representatives from the Consortium Council itself, their distinctive insignias visible even at a distance. This wasn't just another training exercise. This was a demonstration. Mira approached Pod 23, running her hand along its smooth exterior. The design was familiar, standard Nexus Prime engineering, but something about the connections feeding into its base struck her as irregular. Without drawing attention, she knelt to adjust her boot fastening, using the moment to examine the non-standard routing patterns in the pod's power supply. The safety regulators had been bypassed, rerouted through secondary circuits that wouldn't trigger the standard alarms. Vorden wasn't just setting her up to fail. He was setting her up for something far worse. For a brief moment, Mira considered walking away, citing medical concerns or equipment irregularities, but that would only delay the inevitable. Vorden would find another way, another human cadet to make his point. Better her than someone who lacked her particular advantages. Cadets, prepare to enter your assigned simulation pods, Vordan announced, his voice echoing through the chamber. Today's exercise will evaluate your performance under extreme gravitational stress while managing atmospheric contamination. Survival is your primary objective. The other human cadets, Jameson and Reeves, exchanged nervous glances as they approached their pods. Unlike Mira, they came from Earth colonies that had embraced consortium integration. They lacked the paranoia, the preparation that the frontier settlements had maintained. Mira climbed into Pod 23, positioning herself on the contoured seat as the transparent cover descended with a pneumatic hiss. Through the clear canopy, she watched Vordan approach the master control station, his clawed appendages moving with deliberate precision across the interface. Simulation commencing in 30 seconds, came the automated announcement. Gravity calibration initiated. The interior of the pod hummed as gravitational field generators engaged. Mira felt the immediate increase in pressure. 1.6 G, 1.8 G, quickly climbing toward the Class 7 parameters that would simulate conditions on heavy terrestrial worlds. But the pressure didn't stop at the specified 2.2 G. The readout continued climbing. 2.5 G, 2.8 G, 3.0 G, far beyond the exercise parameters, approaching levels that could crush human bone and rupture organs. Mira's breathing became labored as her chest struggled against the invisible weight. She activated her emergency communicator. Control. Pod 23 experiencing gravity anomaly. Request immediate. The communication system went dead. the indicator light shifting from green to red. Outside the pod, she could see Vorden watching impassively, one clawed hand resting on the override panel. At 3.4G, warning lights flashed across the pod's interior. The atmospheric composition began to change, not the standard irritants used in training scenarios, but something far more aggressive. Mira's eyes burned as yellowish gas filled the chamber, and her throat constricted painfully with each breath. The pod's diagnostic display identified the compound, Nifarian neurotoxin, fatal to most oxygen-breathing species within minutes of exposure. This was no training accident. This was calculated murder disguised as equipment failure. Mira's vision blurred as the combined effects of crushing gravity and toxic exposure took their toll. Her vital signs monitor shrieked warnings as her heart rate spiked and oxygen saturation plummeted. Through the haze of pain, she saw Vorden's compound eyes fixed on her pod, watching her die to prove his point about human frailty. Blood vessels burst in her eyes, crimson tears streaming down her face as capillaries ruptured under the strain. Her ribs creaked ominously, threatening to splinter under the relentless pressure. The neurotoxin burned through her respiratory system, each breath like inhaling molten glass. On the vital sign monitor, her readings approached critical failure. Yet even as her body began to shut down, Mira's mind remained clear, focused on a childhood memory of her mother's voice during the emergency drills they'd practiced religiously on their frontier homestead. When all else fails, when the enemy thinks they've won, that's when our real strength activates. The searing pain behind Mira's ear intensified as her body's emergency protocols triggered the dormant technology hidden beneath her skin. Microscopic machines, illegal within consortium space but common among the human frontier settlements, surged into her bloodstream in response to catastrophic biological failure. The nanites spread throughout her system with exponential efficiency, reinforcing cellular walls, neutralizing toxins, and creating temporary support structures around failing organs. Her apparent deterioration continued, the vital signs monitor now showing near flatline readings. But beneath the surface, Mira's body was transforming. Just as her consciousness began to fade, a new threat emerged. A mechanical whirring sounded from the pod's ceiling as a non-lethal suppression turret deployed. Standard equipment meant to deliver incapacitating sonic pulses to cadets who panicked during simulations. Except this turret had been modified. Instead of the expected sonic emitter, a projectile weapon emerged, and before Mira could react, it fired a barrage of metal flechettes directly into her chest. The impacts tore through flesh and bone, shredding vital organs and spilling blood across the pod's interior. The vital signs monitor wailed a final alarm before displaying the flat line that indicated cardiac arrest. Mira Jensen was, by all measurable parameters, dead. Outside the pod, alarms blared as emergency protocols activated. Vorden silenced them with a single command, turning to address the shocked instructors and observers who had witnessed the apparent equipment catastrophe. "Regrettable," he said, mandibles clicking in feigned concern. The human cadet's physiology was clearly unsuited to the rigors of advanced training. I've warned the Consortium Council repeatedly about integrating species with insufficient biological resilience. Lieutenant Sora's appendages twisted in agitation. This was no equipment failure. Tactical officer. The parameters exceeded. We're within established tolerance ranges, Vorden interrupted, his compound eyes reflecting the emergency lights. The Academy Director authorized this demonstration precisely to illustrate the risks of lowering our standards to accommodate lesser species. On the observation deck, the consortium representatives murmured among themselves, their attention divided between the blood-spattered pod and the biometric data streaming to their personal displays. "Arrange for the disposal of the remains," Vorden instructed a junior officer, "and prepare a full analysis of the biological failure cascade for the Council's review." What no one noticed, what the monitoring systems failed to detect, was the strange behavior of the blood pooling inside Pod 23. Instead of settling according to the extreme gravitational field, tiny rivulets moved against the pull, forming intricate patterns across surfaces where natural fluid dynamics should have rendered such movement impossible. 23 seconds after the official time of death, a sensor glitch appeared on the master control panel, a momentary spike in electrical activity within Pod 23. Then the pod's canopy exploded outward. Standing within the shattered remains of Pod 23 was Cadet Mira Jensen, or something that had once been her. Her uniform hung in blood-soaked tatters around a body that seemed to ripple with internal movement. The flechette wounds in her chest remained visible, but no fresh blood flowed from them. Instead, the liquid had formed a glistening, almost metallic second skin across her torso. Most disturbing of all was what she held in her right hand, the severed command core of a control console, a roughly spherical mass of circuitry and neural interfaces that bore an unsettling resemblance to a head. Blood dripped from the severed connections, not her blood, but the specialized hydraulic fluid that served as circulatory medium for Arcturan officers like Vordan. The room fell into stunned silence as Mira stepped from the ruined pod, each movement accompanied by the sound of shifting, clicking metal beneath her skin. When she spoke, her voice carried a strange harmonic quality, as though multiple voices spoke in perfect unison. "Tactical Officer Vordan," she said, raising the severed command core. "Your demonstration has yielded unexpected results." Vordan backed away, mandibles clicking rapidly in what any Arcturan would recognize as primal fear. "Impossible," he hissed through his translator. "The toxin concentration alone was 2.7 times the lethal dose for baseline humans." Mira finished for him. "Just as the gravitational stress was 3.7 times beyond sustainable human tolerances, and the flechettes penetrated my heart, left lung, and liver." She took another step forward, and the assembled officers and cadets instinctively retreated. "Your calculations were flawless. Officer Vordan, I did die, precisely as you intended." She tossed the command core at his feet, where it rolled to a stop, still leaking hydraulic fluid onto the polished floor. "What your extensive research failed to account for was what happened next." Mira turned to face the consortium observers on the deck above, her eyes reflecting light with an unnatural silver sheen. "For 12,000 years, your species have cataloged humans as curious biological anomalies, primitive apes who stumbled into space travel before evolving proper survival adaptations. You've measured our bone density, our respiratory capacity, our endurance limits, and found us wanting." The nanites beneath her skin had completed their primary emergency functions and now worked to restore her normal appearance, the metallic sheen gradually fading as her body re-established its natural equilibrium. Only her eyes retained their silver glow, the one visible sign of her internal transformation. "What you failed to measure was our capacity for adaptation through innovation. The humans you've studied, the cooperative colonies who embraced consortium integration, represent only one faction of our species. Those of us from the frontier settlements carry certain insurance policies against the prejudice we've faced since first contact." Lieutenant Sora floated forward, her scientific curiosity temporarily overriding her shock. "Emergency nanite deployment," she whispered. "Banned technology." "Survival technology," Mira corrected. "Activated only in response to lethal harm, like that inflicted deliberately today." She gestured toward the ruined pod. "Your monitoring systems detected my death, but failed to notice my resurrection. A telling oversight for a civilization that prides itself on technological superiority." From the observation deck, an elder Pelosi counselor leaned forward. "How did you obtain Vordan's command core? The control station is across the chamber." Mira smiled, though the expression held no warmth. "The same way I survived neurotoxin exposure and ballistic trauma. The nanites didn't just repair my body, they extended it." Some remained inside to continue healing, while others formed temporary external structures. She flexed her fingers, and the assembled officers could almost imagine the microscopic swarm that had briefly extended from her body to seize and sever the Arcturan's neural interface. "A precaution," she added, "to ensure the officer who attempted to murder me couldn't complete the job while I recovered." Vordan's compound eyes darted between Mira and the consortium observers. "The human admits to carrying illegal technology. She should be detained immediately." "Silence," commanded the lead counselor, a Melbari elder, whose age-whitened appendages signified centuries of experience. "You have lost all authority in this matter, Tactical Officer Vordan. Your deliberate actions to cause a cadet's death, regardless of species, violate every principle of the Academy." Security officers entered the chamber, surrounding Vordan with weapons drawn. The disgraced officer's exoskeleton clicked as he drew himself up in one final display of defiance. "The consortium grows weak," he chittered, "diluting our strength with lesser species who just demonstrated resilience beyond anything in our biological classification system," interrupted the Pelosi counselor. "Take him to detention." As Vordan was led away, Mira felt the nanites completing their work, her body returning to its normal state, save for the newly formed scar tissue where the flechettes had torn through her chest. The silver glow faded from her eyes, leaving her looking much as she had before entering Pod 23, though the blood-soaked uniform and the stunned expressions of her fellow cadets ensured nothing would ever be the same. Lieutenant Sora approached cautiously. "You should report to medical, Cadet Jensen." Mira shook her head. "My internal diagnostics show all critical functions restored to normal parameters." She paused, noting the confusion on the Melbari's face. "But I will submit to examination to provide your scientists with data they clearly lack." In the hours that followed, Mira underwent the most comprehensive medical evaluation ever performed on a human within consortium space. Scanners mapped the dormant nanites, now nestled alongside her cellular structures, waiting for the next crisis to activate them. Researchers marveled at the elegant programming that allowed the microscopic machines to rebuild damaged tissue while maintaining her genetic integrity. The Academy director, a stoic Centaurian named Arnox, personally oversaw the investigation into Vordan's sabotage. Security recordings revealed the tactical officer's meticulous planning, the rerouted safety protocols, the modified turret, the tampered atmospheric controls. The evidence suggested this wasn't his first attempt to demonstrate human inadequacy, merely the first where he had escalated to lethal force. 3 days after the incident, Mira was summoned to the Academy Director's office. The circular chamber, designed to accommodate the various physiologies of consortium species, featured a sunken conversation area where Arnox waited alongside representatives from the Consortium Council. "Cadet Jensen," the director began, his crystalline voice resonating with formal precision. "The Council has reviewed the events in Simulation Chamber 17. Tactical Officer Vordan has been stripped of rank and remanded to the penal colony on Proxima 4 for attempted murder." Mira nodded, saying nothing. The frontier settlements had taught her the value of listening over speaking when dealing with consortium authorities. "What concerns us more deeply," continued the Melbari elder, "is the revelation of illegal nanite technology deployed within a consortium military institution. Under normal circumstances, this would result in immediate expulsion and criminal charges. However," interjected the Pelosi counselor, "these circumstances are far from normal. Your response to Vordan's attack has forced us to reevaluate several long-held assumptions about human capabilities." Arnox's faceted eyes studied Mira with newfound respect. "The Academy has implemented a complete overhaul of simulation safety protocols. No cadet, of any species, will face such deliberate endangerment again." "And what of the other human cadets?" Mira asked. "Will they continue to face institutional prejudice based on outdated biological classifications?" The question hung in the air, uncomfortable but necessary. For centuries, humans had occupied the lowest tier of consortium hierarchy, their physical limitations deemed unsuitable for advanced responsibilities despite their cognitive abilities. The Melbari elders' appendages rippled thoughtfully. The Consortium Council has convened an emergency session to reassess human classification within our species index. Preliminary findings suggest a significant revision is warranted, not based on standard physical metrics, but on adaptive potential. Translation, said the Pelosi counselor, with the faintest flicker of amusement in her circulatory patterns. We've been measuring the wrong things. A species' capacity to integrate technology seamlessly into biological function represents an evolutionary strategy we failed to properly categorize. Mira absorbed this information with cautious optimism. And the nanite technology remains prohibited for general use, Arnok stated firmly. But a provisional exception has been granted for existing human implants, provided they are registered and subject to monitoring. It was more than Mira had expected. A surprising concession from a governing body notorious for its rigid adherence to established protocols. Perhaps her demonstration had shaken them more deeply than she realized. There is one more matter, said the Melbari elder. The Vanguard exploration vessel Horizon departs next month for the uncharted regions beyond the Perseus Gap. They have requested you join their crew as a specialist in adaptive technologies. Mira's surprise must have shown on her face, as the Pelosi counselor added, "Your unique capabilities make you ideally suited for encountering unknown environments and potential biological hazards. The experience of nearly dying yet continuing to function has created a valuable skill set." "I would be honored," Mira replied carefully. "Under certain conditions." The council members exchanged glances. Humans requesting conditions was still a novelty in consortium diplomacy. "First," Mira continued, "all human cadets must receive equal treatment and evaluation standards, effective immediately. Second, I require unrestricted access to communicate my experiences to human frontier settlements. And third, my nanite programming remains my own, to be studied but not altered without my explicit consent." She expected resistance, perhaps even outrage at such demands from a cadet who, days earlier, would have been considered barely worthy of basic academy training. Instead, Arnox inclined his crystalline head in acceptance. "The incident in Chamber 17 has forced a painful but necessary reassessment," he said. "Your terms are agreeable, with the understanding that you will provide quarterly reports on nanite function to our research division." As Mira left the director's office, she found Cadet Kira waiting in the corridor, the Pelosi's translucent skin pulsing with anxious patterns. "I wanted to see if you were all right," Kira said, all four eyes blinking in rapid succession. "The rumors. They say you died and came back holding Vorden's head." Mira smiled faintly. "A slight exaggeration. It was only his command corps, and I was only mostly dead." "They're installing a plaque," Kira continued, falling into step beside her. "In Chamber 17, the Academy director insisted on it as a reminder to future instructors." "What does it say?" "Assumptions are the mother of all mistakes." Kira's skin rippled with the Pelosi equivalent of nervous laughter. Though most cadets are already calling it Jensen's Law, Mira considered this as they walked through the Academy corridors that suddenly seemed less imposing, less alien than they had just days before. The consortium had existed for 12 millennia before humanity stumbled onto the galactic stage, its hierarchies and classifications calcified into rigid certainty. It had taken one desperate act of survival to crack that foundation. In the weeks that followed, Mira divided her time between advanced training for the Horizon mission and sessions with Academy researchers eager to document her nanite capabilities. The technology itself wasn't revolutionary by consortium standards. Similar systems existed in various forms across multiple species, but the integration method and emergency deployment protocols represented an approach they had never considered. Humans, it seemed, had evolved along a different path, not toward biological specialization like the consortium races, but toward technological symbiosis that could be activated in moments of extreme need. It wasn't elegant by Pelosi standards, or durable by Arcturan measures, but it was adaptable in ways that confounded traditional classification. The evening before her departure, Mira visited Simulation Chamber 17, now renovated and equipped with enhanced safety systems. The plaque Kira had mentioned gleamed on the wall beside the entrance, its simple message a reminder of how quickly certainty could become hubris. As she stood contemplating the chamber where she had died and been reborn, Lieutenant Sora approached, her ribbon-like appendages moving with characteristic grace. "The Horizon's captain requested a final assessment of your capabilities," the Melbari said, extending a data pad. "I took the liberty of including certain details regarding your resilience that weren't captured in the official reports." Mira accepted the pad, scanning the document with raised eyebrows. "This is surprisingly thorough." "The consortium has always excelled at data collection," Sora replied. "What we sometimes lack is wisdom in its interpretation." She paused, her appendages curling in the Melbari gesture of respectful curiosity. "May I ask a personal question, Cadet Jensen?" "Of course." "Did you know, when you entered Pod 23, did you suspect Vordan's intentions? Did you anticipate what happened?" Mira considered the question carefully. The truth was complex. She had suspected sabotage but not murder, had known of her nanite failsafe, but never experienced its activation. "I knew there was risk," she said finally. "On the frontier, humans learn early that survival often depends on preparation for the worst possible outcome." Sora's appendages rippled thoughtfully. "The consortium has much to learn from such perspective. We have existed so long in our established hierarchies that we forgot the value of anticipating change." She gestured toward the chamber. "What happened here has initiated the most significant reevaluation of consortium protocol in 2,000 years." "And Vordan?" Mira asked. "Has there been any word from Proxima IV?" "The former tactical officer has refused all visitors and communication," Sora replied. "His clan has formally disavowed his actions, a significant dishonor in Arcturan culture. Some speculate he will petition for exile to the unaligned systems rather than face his own kind." There was justice in that outcome, Mira thought. The architect of her intended death, forced to confront existence outside the hierarchies he had so fiercely defended. Yet she took no pleasure in his downfall. Vordan was merely the most visible symptom of a prejudice that permeated consortium culture. A prejudice now being painfully excised. The following morning, Mira boarded the transport shuttle that would take her to the Horizon's orbital dock. The exploration vessel represented the consortium's finest technology, a massive starship designed to traverse the uncharted regions where standard navigational protocols failed and unknown biological threats might lurk. As she settled into her assigned quarters aboard the Horizon, Mira unpacked the few personal belongings she had brought from the academy. Among them was a small, holographic projector containing images of her parents, frontier settlers who had insisted their daughter receive both the best consortium education and the protective technology that might one day save her life. They had been right, though not in any way they could have anticipated. A soft chime announced a visitor at her door. When it slid open, Mira found herself facing the Horizon's captain, a Centaurian like Academy Director Arnox, but with the azure crystalline features that denoted younger age. Specialist Jensen," the captain said, using her new title. "I am Captain Thrix. I wanted to personally welcome you aboard the Horizon." "Thank you, Captain," Mira replied. "I look forward to contributing to the mission." Thrix's faceted eyes studied her with undisguised curiosity. "Your file makes for fascinating reading. 23 seconds between clinical death and functional resurrection, a record unlikely to be broken anytime soon." Mira had grown accustomed to such comments in the weeks since the incident. Her experience had become something of a legend at the academy, retold with increasing embellishment by cadets and instructors alike. "The nanites responded to emergency protocols," she explained, as she had countless times before. "Nothing more remarkable than any other survival adaptation." "Perhaps," Thrix acknowledged. "But adaptation that fundamentally alters our understanding of species classification is remarkable by definition." The captain's crystalline features shifted into the Centaurian expression of respectful amusement. "The Consortium Council has been in continuous session debating the implications. Some elder species are quite distressed at the prospect of revision to the established hierarchy. Change is often uncomfortable," Mira observed, "especially for those who benefited most from the previous order." "Indeed," Thrix gestured toward the corridor. "Would you care to join me for a tour of the bridge? The senior officers are eager to meet the specialist who has caused such upheaval in consortium politics." As they walked through the Horizon's pristine corridors, Mira noticed subtle differences in how the crew, representing 12 different species, regarded her. There was curiosity, certainly, and perhaps a hint of apprehension, but none of the dismissive condescension she had grown accustomed to at the academy. Word of her resurrection had spread throughout consortium space, transforming perceptions of human capability almost overnight. She had become, without intention or desire, a symbol of her species' unexpected potential. On the bridge, officers of various species occupied workstations designed to accommodate their diverse physiologies. A Pelosi navigation specialist, her skin pulsing with complex computational patterns, looked up as they entered. "Specialist Jensen," she greeted, her 4 eyes blinking in the rapid sequence that indicated excitement. "Your arrival completes our crew complement. We depart for the Perseus Gap in approximately 12 hours. As Captain Thrix introduced her to the senior staff, Mira reflected on the strange path that had brought her here. She had entered the academy, hoping only to prove that humans deserved a place within consortium civilization. Instead, she had died, been reborn, and catalyzed a fundamental reassessment of the very structures she had sought to join. Later, alone in her quarters, Mira examined the fresh scars on her chest, where the flechettes had torn through flesh and bone. The nanites had repaired the damage with remarkable efficiency, but they had left visible reminders, perhaps programmed to ensure she never forgot the cost of her survival. She activated her personal communication terminal, composing a message to the frontier settlement where her parents still lived. The message would take weeks to reach them, traveling through consortium relays to the distant colony they called home. "I have been assigned to the exploration vessel Horizon," she wrote. "The mission represents an unprecedented opportunity for human involvement in consortium expansion." She paused, considering how much to reveal about the circumstances that had led to her appointment. "Recent events have prompted a re-evaluation of human classification within consortium hierarchy. The nanite protocols you insisted upon saved my life and may have changed the course of interspecies relations." After sending the message, Mira stood before the viewport in her quarters, watching the distant stars. Somewhere out there, beyond the Perseus Gap, lay truly uncharted space, regions where even the elder consortium species had never ventured. The Horizon would be the first to pierce that veil, and she, a human once deemed barely worthy of academy training, would be among its crew. 23 seconds had changed everything. 23 seconds between death and rebirth, between victim and symbol, between submission and transformation. As the Horizon prepared to depart Nexus Prime, news arrived that the Consortium Council had reached its decision. The human species had been formally reclassified from Tier 7, limited biological viability, to Tier 3, exceptional adaptive potential, the most significant elevation in status ever granted in consortium history. Cadet Mira Jensen, now Specialist Jensen of the Vanguard Exploration Corps, stood on the observation deck as Nexus Prime receded in the distance. the gleaming spires of the consortium capital diminishing to pinpoints of light against the planetary surface. Behind her, the ship's intercom activated with a soft chime. "All personnel prepare for transitional jump sequence," came Captain Thrix's voice. "We venture into uncharted space in precisely 23 seconds." Mira smiled at the unintentional symbolism. 23 seconds, the time span that had transformed her from unremarkable cadet to living legend, from biological curiosity to respected specialist. 23 seconds to remind the most advanced civilization in known space that assumptions were, indeed, the mother of all mistakes. As the Horizon's engines engaged and reality itself seemed to bend around the massive vessel, Mira touched the small scar behind her ear, the hidden reservoir of nanites that now represented not just her personal survival, but a new understanding between humans and the consortium they had joined. The ship entered transitional space with a momentary distortion of light and perspective, and Nexus Prime vanished from view, replaced by the infinite possibility of the unknown. 23 seconds had changed everything. The next 23 years would determine what that change truly meant.